To protect Ivy, Jason publicly claimed that he and Ivy have a child together. Meanwhile, my child became known as a bastard by everyone. The night before taking Ivy abroad to nurture her pregnancy, he affectionately touched my face. "Elena, I love you. After Ivy gives birth, I will definitely come back to you." I pretended to obediently agree. But he didn't know that this would be our last meeting. Upon learning that Jason planned to take Ivy abroad in 3 days to nurture her pregnancy, I called my mother-in-law. "Mom, I want a divorce." My mother-in-law on the other end of the line just sighed, "Child, it's Jason who has wronged you." Ever since Jason publicly claimed that my child is a bastard, we had the most serious argument in our 7 years together. But when he learned that I wanted to abort the child, he had me confined to the villa. Even when I went for prenatal checkups, there would be a dozen bodyguards following me. He said, "This is our child, you can't get rid of him." So, he still knew that this is his child. His hypocritical, casual words could ruin my life and the child's life. Even though he knew that our child is his own flesh and blood, while Ivy's child is the one whose father is unknown, the real bastard. Gently stroking my already protruding belly, I knew this was my last chance. Even though I was reluctant to abort the child in my womb, I didn't want him to be born and bear the burden of others' slander and gossip. As if feeling the warmth of my palm, the belly moved slightly. It was as if the child and I had a telepathic connection. He knew I was sad and was comforting me. Tears instantly flowed down. Withdrawing my hand, I covered my face and sobbed. "Child, I'm sorry, forgive your mother for being heartless." Having just calmed my emotions, the villa's door opened from outside. Jason walked up to me, looked at my swollen eyes, and said indifferently, "For the sake of the child, you need to take care of your health, don't cry all the time." It's easy for him to say. If I could control my emotions, I wouldn't have fallen in love with the man in front of me in the first place. I knew clearly that he always had a place in his heart for Ivy. I knew clearly that his feelings for me were not true love. The person I loved so deeply was also the one who hurt me the most. "You've done so many things that wronged me, confined me, made me lose my freedom." "What, don't I even have the right to cry?" He just looked at me, his eyes slightly red, with a hint of guilt, but couldn't say a word. Just like a few months ago, when I first suspected I was pregnant and went to the hospital to confirm it, I happened to see Jason accompanying Ivy for her checkup. He was attentive and caring, deeply concerned that she might get bumped or hurt. "Brother Jason, touch our child, I think he's moving." Jason's face showed a gentle light. He let Ivy take his hand and place it on her flat abdomen. The next second, he looked up and saw me standing at the corner. Without a word of explanation, he just stood there stunned. What a loving young couple. If I weren't Jason's wife, I would sincerely say something envious. Unfortunately, I couldn't say it, and he didn't deserve it. The man in front of me was silent for a while, then seemed to remember something and said perfunctorily, "Tomorrow is your birthday, I'll hold a birthday party for you. By the way, Mom just told me she's coming back to take care of you. With Mom taking care of you, I'll be more at ease." He can indeed be at ease to go abroad with his Ivy to nurture her pregnancy, not needing to come back for months. But he didn't know why his parents, who had been enjoying their retirement abroad, suddenly decided to return home. Nor did he know that his parents already knew about the despicable things he had done to me. I sneered without objecting. It was I who begged his mother to come back because I knew that with my current situation, I couldn't escape from Jason's control. Seeing that I didn't react, he squatted down and looked at me with a bit of affection. "Elena, I love you. After Ivy gives birth, I will definitely come back to you." Such words, I would only treat as air. Even if he truly thinks this way now, as long as Ivy says a word, he will mercilessly void his promise to me. So, I will never believe his words again. In 3 days, he can completely get rid of me and wholeheartedly be the father of Ivy's child. That night, Jason didn't stay at home because Ivy said the fetal movement was intense, so he immediately found an excuse to accompany her. We dated for 4 years and have been married for 3. I always thought Jason loved me. Until Ivy came back, until she got pregnant with someone else's child. It was as if everything changed suddenly. My husband, who used to love me somewhat, now wholeheartedly cares for another woman. I was confined in this sunless cage, gradually wearing away all my love for him. Disappointment accumulated until it completely vanished. So, it was time for me to leave. The next day, for the birthday party, Jason said he would personally pick me up and called several times to urge me. But when I went out, there was only the bodyguard's car at the door. "Elena, I have something to handle here. You go first, I'll be there soon." I didn't have any hope to begin with, so how could there be disappointment? The piercing cold wind of deep winter scraped across my cheeks like a scythe, but I couldn't feel any pain. Just like my feelings for Jason from disappointment to despair, there was no more pain that could hurt me. The car stopped in front of a clubhouse. I frowned but still got out of the car. Led by the bodyguard, I walked into a private room. But I didn't know anyone inside. Their strange gazes seemed to see through me, full of mockery and disdain, as if I were some kind of trash, keeping their distance. She cuckolded Jason and still has the face to let him celebrate her birthday. Jason is so pitiful, he even allows her to keep that bastard. I don't know what Jason sees in her, she can't even compare to Ivy's heels. They spoke loudly, deliberately for me to hear. "See, this is Jason's masterpiece." He couldn't bear to see Ivy face her parents' accusations. But he never thought that the harm I suffered because of them was 1,000 times worse than Ivy's. I could not care, but I really couldn't bear for my child to be pointed at by thousands of fingers like this. I stood up, intending to leave this place. Anyway, this birthday party didn't seem to welcome me. But when I opened the door of the private room, I saw Jason and Ivy standing at the doorway, one avoiding my gaze with a guilty look, the other showing a triumphant smile. I knew they heard everything at the door, how the people in the private room insulted me, how they mocked me. But he said nothing, only letting Ivy pull me back in. "So the birthday girl arrived first, it's my fault, being pregnant makes it hard to move." Brother Jason was afraid I wouldn't be comfortable in another car, so he insisted on picking me up. Ivy smugly stroked her own belly and then looked at mine, as if to say, "You're pregnant too, but so what?" Because of her words, the surroundings erupted in teasing cheers. From childhood to adulthood, Jason has always doted on Ivy exclusively. "When your child is born, does that mean good things are near? Don't forget to invite us to the wedding banquet." Amidst the congratulations, they seemed to forget that I was still Jason's wife. They also seemed to forget that this wasn't some engagement party but a birthday party Jason held for me out of guilt. Looking at their faces, I couldn't control a bout of dry heaving. I had just stood up to leave when, somehow, I caught Jason's attention. He frowned at me and said coldly, "This is your birthday party, what does it look like if you leave?" "It's just morning sickness, endure it, and it'll pass." But the next second, Ivy also retched. He immediately nervously helped her sit down, took out a preserved plum from his pocket, personally tore open the packaging, and personally fed it into her mouth. The surroundings again erupted in teasing cheers. I closed my eyes for a moment. My birthday party had become a stage for them to show off their affection. They chatted and laughed with their mutual friends like a real couple, while I was just forgotten in the corner. There wasn't even a birthday cake, the symbol of a birthday. How absurd and ridiculous. This was the birthday party Jason prepared for me. Forcing back my tears, I swallowed all the bitterness. "I really should say congratulations, Jason, because in 2 days, I will completely leave you. The position of Mrs. Jason, let it be given to the person you care about." That night, I didn't leave, I just sat lonely in the corner, watching this absurd birthday party until the end. Only when it was over did Jason finally notice me in the corner and voluntarily offered to take me home. Clearly, he is my husband, but it was as if he wasn't going back to his own home. But just as he finished speaking, Ivy, who came over afterward, grabbed his arm. "Jason, I'm tired, I want to go back and rest quickly." Jason lovingly touched her hair. "Is the baby troubling you again? Then let's go home first." He left with his arm around Ivy, while I could only get into the bodyguard's car again. I felt like a clown. Touching my cheek, I thought tears would flow, but they didn't. So, when pain reaches its extreme, one really can't feel the pain anymore. I really don't understand, since he cares so much about his childhood sweetheart, why did he marry me and have a child? Since he so wants to prove to the whole world how much he dotes on Ivy. And why doesn't he divorce me? Insisting on keeping our child, to be cursed and ridiculed along with me. That night, I didn't sleep well. It wasn't until the morning that I was awakened by the doorbell. Ivy brought her parents and suddenly came to the door. As soon as Vivian saw me, she sneered, pregnant with someone else's bastard and still shamelessly occupying the position of Mrs. Song. I don't know how your parents raised such a shameless daughter. Robert, standing beside, also looked at me with contempt. Alright, why waste words with such a person? Even looking at her makes me feel dirty. After saying that, he and Vivian carried several large suitcases upstairs. Watching their backs as they went upstairs, I couldn't understand how they, as parents, could raise such a shameless daughter. Seeing that only I was left in the living room, Ivy walked up to me with a mocking smile, proudly saying, "So what if you're married, so what if you're pregnant with his child? You still can't compare to me and my child. By the way, brother Jason said that when the child is born, he will make my child the eldest son. As for your bastard, he will only take him as an adopted son." Looking at Ivy's dazzling smile, I just felt a bit bored. I've seen too many of her tricks. I stepped aside from her position, intending to leave. But Ivy suddenly fell to the ground and started crying. "I'm sorry, sister, it's all my fault." Ivy's cries attracted her parents. Her mother, like a madwoman, pounced towards me. Just then, the villa's door was opened, and Jason rushed in. I was about to explain to him when Vivian rushed over and knocked me down, slapping my face while cursing with filthy words. "Aunt." While Jason was stopping her, a trace of heartache flashed in his eyes. He was about to speak when Ivy cried and threw herself into his arms. "Brother Jason, you promised that after our child is born, you would let my parents come to take care of us. The place I live is small, it can't accommodate our family of 5. I just wanted to ask Miss Elena if she minds living with us, but she suddenly hit me." She covered her face and then her belly, crying even louder. I was so annoyed that my head started to spin. The place where I was hit was painfully numb and probably swollen. But under Ivy's palm, her face was as white as before, with nothing on it. Feeling Jason's troubled gaze, I wiped my tears and silently stood up. The husband who once said he would protect me and dote on me for a lifetime. When I needed protection the most, he became the confidence for another woman to act shamelessly. Perhaps our marriage was a mistake from the beginning. He couldn't let go of his childhood sweetheart, so he could only let go of our marriage. Because in one day, I would leave him. Ivy, afraid something might happen to the child, clamored to go to the hospital for a checkup. Vivian clamored for me to apologize. Jason, caught in the middle, looked at my already red and swollen cheek. In the end, he still chose the childhood sweetheart he couldn't let go of. "Elena, I'll take Ivy to the hospital first. Mom has come back from abroad, when I return, I'll send you to her place." I promised Ivy, "You have to understand me, I don't want to be a person who breaks his word." Looking at this man who shared my bed for 3 years, who kept talking about his promises to others, yet had long forgotten that when he married me, he also said he would love me forever. And every single thing he solemnly promised me those he could do, he started but gave up halfway. After Ivy came back, he didn't fulfill any of them. I put away the desolation in my heart, just wanting to end this farce quickly. "Elena, I love you." Seeing my expressionless face, Jason anxiously added, "No matter what you've done to wrong me, my love for you has never changed." Listening to his words, I really found it laughable. "What have I done to wrong you?" I approached and asked him softly, "Jason, have you lied so much that you've forgotten whose belly your child is in?" Jason was stunned, then remembering that Ivy's family was still there, he was about to question me. But I waved my hand, interrupting him. "Don't worry, I'll leave now and won't disturb your family reunion." Hearing that Jason was going to send me away, Ivy's belly suddenly didn't hurt anymore. She no longer clamored to go to the hospital and even particularly warm-heartedly urged Jason to help me pack my things. I sneered and pointed to the bedroom. "I've already packed my luggage, you can help me bring it down, and I can leave now." Jason looked at me in astonishment. But I had already put on my coat and walked towards the door. I originally planned to stay at Mom's place for a few days anyway. He breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly ran upstairs to help me bring down my luggage, even thoughtfully calling a car for me. Because I knew that his car was already filled with Ivy's personal belongings, with no space for me. I sat in the taxi, watching the villa where I had lived for 3 years getting farther and farther away, with no lingering attachment. The car was silent. I closed my eyes, feeling utterly exhausted. It was as if I had a very long dream, so long that I relived the first half of my life. Loving him took up 1/3 of my life. Realizing his true nature took me only 3 months. Once I realized it, I no longer loved him. The car slowly stopped in front of his mother's house. When I pushed open the door and got out, my slightly protruding belly and heavy coat made my movements a bit clumsy. Jason sent a message, "Elena, wait for me a few more months, I will definitely come to pick you up. Once Ivy's matter is resolved, I will clear your name and our child's. Then, our family of 3 will never be separated again." Looking at his solemn guarantee, I smiled and didn't reply. Pulling my suitcase, I walked towards his mother's house. There was no more disappointment or compromise, only relief. "Goodbye, Jason. This is our last meeting. From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other." The next day, lying in the cold operating room, I knew that as soon as I closed my eyes and opened them again, this child would leave me forever. But I wouldn't regret it. I couldn't let my child bear the humiliation he shouldn't have to endure from birth. My consciousness gradually faded, and I slowly closed my eyes. Tears still couldn't help but flow down. At the same time, Jason, who was about to board the plane, suddenly received a call from his friend. "Jason, congratulations, you can finally get rid of the burden at home." Jason's expression changed, and he frowned, asking, "What do you mean?" His friend was taken aback, obviously not expecting him to ask back. "You don't know? I just saw Elena at the hospital. She's having an abortion, she's already in the operating room." Jason felt a chill run through his body, as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. He hung up the phone tremblingly. Without time to think, he left Ivy, who was still urging him to board, and ran frantically towards the airport exit. Jason arrived at the hospital where I was as quickly as possible. But no matter how he searched, he couldn't find any trace of me. He inquired at the hospital, but all they said was that I had already left. Unwilling to give up, he called his friend again, who only said he saw me enter the operating room 2 hours ago. After making a fuss at the hospital to no avail, he returned to his mother's house. Ignoring his mother sitting in the living room drinking tea, he rushed straight to the 2nd floor of the villa. But he searched all the rooms and couldn't find any sign of me. A bad premonition lingered in his heart. No matter how he looked, there was no trace of me in this house. "Mom, where is Elena?" He was so anxious that cold sweat broke out. Unlike his anxious appearance, his mother sat calmly on the sofa. "Elena has already aborted the child and left this city. This is what she asked me to give you." She put down her teacup and picked up the divorce agreement on the table. When Jason saw these words, he widened his eyes in disbelief. As if he had a premonition, last night, he suddenly really wanted to call me but couldn't get through no matter what. Until he woke up from a nightmare and saw that the person beside him wasn't me, uneasy emotions almost engulfed him. For the first time, he ignored Ivy's coquetry, left her at the airport, and resolutely came to find me. But he didn't know that he was still a step too late because I had already finished the abortion surgery and directly took my luggage to the station. No, Elena wouldn't leave me, and she wouldn't abort our child. When he said this, it was almost a roar, as if venting all his unease and panic. He snatched the divorce agreement and tore it to pieces. Looking at Jason, who had already made a big mistake, his mother slowly stood up. Jason, in these past few months, if you had even for a moment remembered that Elena is your wife, she wouldn't have left so resolutely. A question that struck his soul. He deeply lowered his head. Indeed, it was too late, and he was wrong beyond measure. No one is willing to be hurt, and there's no rule that I must wait in place as he wishes. He can't blame others for my leaving, he can only blame himself for being bewitched and doing something deserving of death. Jason stumbled out the door. He went to the villa where we had lived for 3 years, only to find that it had been completely taken over by Ivy's parents. He didn't know where to find me, nor did he know if he could ever find me again. He just ran as if venting, like a complete madman in the silent night. Finally, he sat dejectedly by the street, with only his helpless panting left. He called my phone over and over again, but as expected, he only got the repeated, emotionless mechanical response. The phone number he knew had already been snapped and thrown into the trash by me when he left yesterday. And at this moment, I had already boarded the plane that would give me freedom, with no lingering attachment, no burden. Only the person who made me desperate to get away, just like how I desperately fell in love with him back then. The long flight didn't make me, who had just undergone surgery, feel tired. Instead, I felt more relieved and relaxed. When the plane landed, I finally showed a genuine smile, a smile that I hadn't shown once in these past few months. I used to think that the worst thing was losing the person I loved the most. Now, I realize that the worst thing is compromising everything because I loved someone too much. Fortunately, I no longer love him. My beautiful life starts anew at this moment. The destination is a small mountain town suitable for recuperation. I need to take care of my health first. After that, I might work hard to achieve my life ideals, or I might go with the flow in any part of the world, enjoying every day of freedom. Just like that, several months passed. I was eating and singing with a group of people. Leaving my hometown to start anew in a strange city was only slightly uncomfortable at the beginning. It took me a month to go from being socially anxious to integrating. In this month, I made many friends. In the past, I blindly invested myself in my relationship with Jason. For 7 years, I had no friends and rarely socialized, devoting all my thoughts to one person, thus completely losing myself. Elena, you look very different today, is it because? My colleague Maggie said with a mischievous smile, casting her gaze towards the man beside me. A few months ago, I joined a small company. His name is Leo, the boss of our company, young, handsome, and very approachable. He managed to turn the relationship between boss and subordinate into friendship, so much so that Maggie often joked about me and Leo without restraint. The source of the joke came from a heavy rain a few days ago. I didn't bring an umbrella and couldn't get a cab. I thought I would have to wait at the company until the rain stopped to go home, but Leo came out of the office. Didn't bring an umbrella? Can't get a cab? I'll give you a ride? Without giving me time to answer, he asked me 3 questions in a row. Yes. I was only answering his first question. But he had already picked up my bag without minding. Let's go. That day, to give me a ride, we were stuck in traffic for a whole hour, until I heard his stomach growling. He scratched his head awkwardly, saying he didn't eat enough at lunch. To express my apology and gratitude, I treated him to dinner near my home. It was just a reciprocal dinner, but it happened to be seen by Maggie. From then on, every day, she was always suspicious, thinking there was something between me and Leo. Not to mention that I had just gotten out of a relationship only a few months ago. The divorce agreement I left for Jason, he still hadn't signed. Leo and I were just ordinary colleagues. At this moment, Maggie was still looking at us with an excited face, as if she had to wait for us to say something. You're overthinking it, be good, put away your curiosity. Getting a negative answer, Maggie still didn't give up. She kept clamoring to take pictures of everyone, but most of the photos she took were of me and Leo together. My long-lost smile was all captured. This was my original self, the little son who was born to love smiling, lively and cheerful. The photos I posted on Instagram quickly received countless likes, including from Jason, with whom I hadn't been in contact. After I left, I changed my number. He could only try to find my whereabouts from my other social media accounts. Looking at the pictures one by one, seeing my long-lost smile, seeing my flat abdomen. He fell into contemplation and regret. He realized how long it had been since he saw my genuine smile, and how when he first met me, I warmed his heart like a little sun. Back then, wasn't it my cheerful personality that attracted him? So much so that during the days when I pursued him crazily, he forgot about Ivy and was wholeheartedly with me. Everything started to go wrong after Ivy came back. He retrieved their happy memories of being childhood sweethearts and got used to putting Ivy first. He confidently thought that I, who loved him so deeply, wouldn't bear to leave. But he didn't realize that while pushing me into the abyss, he also lost the person he cherished equally. Now, with the villa occupied by Ivy and her parents, he had nowhere to go. After staying in a hotel for a week straight, he wanted to go back to his own home. After all, that was the home where he and I lived together for 3 years. Even though my things were long gone, it still retained our once beautiful memories. Mom, in a few days, I'll persuade Jason to transfer the villa to my name. He doesn't even want his own wife and child, wholeheartedly taking care of me and someone else's child. Such a foolish sucker, I'm afraid I won't find another one in the future, I have to get more from him. Before entering the villa, he overheard the conversation between Ivy and her parents. So, her parents knew all along that Ivy's child wasn't his. They had carefully fabricated a lie and put on a show for him, all for his money. Don't forget to get a house for your brother too. Otherwise, this villa can be your brother's wedding house. Jason's favoritism towards her since childhood was because he knew that her family favored boys over girls. Even though she was strictly disciplined, she was just not favored. That's why Jason was good to her. Only for the sake of their friendship of over 10 years, he wanted to give her double the love she couldn't get from her parents. But unfortunately, when a person has knelt for too long, it's hard to stand up straight again. Deeply ingrained thoughts and his almost obsessive indulgence towards Ivy actually encouraged her to collude with her family to deceive his feelings and money. Don't worry, Mom, that pushover has left and didn't even leave the child behind. So what if the child isn't his? The position of Mrs. Jason is mine alone, and all his money will be mine in the future. Jason's eyes were bloodshot as he kicked the door open with force. This was the first time he argued with Ivy, and it was also the time he made up his mind to see this woman for the last time. After driving them out, he looked at this home that had long been shattered. Even though nothing had changed, he could no longer find any trace of me. Elena, I was wrong. Please come back. He sat alone on the floor, leaning against the wall, tears flowing unconsciously. Now, he truly had nothing left. Originally, he could still deceive himself, thinking that helping Ivy was doing a good deed. But now, it was nothing but a ridiculous scam. He had always been the clown. He was wrong beyond measure and lost completely. I didn't expect that after Jason liked my Instagram photos, he would appear in front of my company during an ordinary after-work time. The sunset was beautiful, but I had no mind to appreciate it because I saw the person I didn't want to see. Elena, I finally found you. Instagram shows the IP of the city I'm in. It took him several days to appear, presumably using all his connections to find my company. I didn't intend to avoid him, I just didn't want him to stir up any waves in my peaceful life. He was holding flowers, his face full of eagerness. But when he saw my expressionless face, his smile became somewhat stiff. It had only been a few months, but he looked older. He always had high demands for his appearance, yet he was wearing wrinkled clothes and had slight stubble on his chin. Without me by his side, he could hardly take care of even the most basic aspects of life. Elena, who is this? Maggie, who came out with me, looked at Jason in disbelief. I just smiled and, while looking at Jason, put on an indifferent expression. Ex-husband. In this strange atmosphere, Maggie left quietly. And Jason was stimulated by the word ex-husband, his face changing from full of expectation to a desolate expression. Even his back seemed a bit hunched. In the cafe at the company entrance, the 99 roses he brought always attracted a lot of attention. But he forgot that I am extremely sensitive to scents and pollen. These roses, even if not in an enclosed space, would make me cough, retch, and sneeze frantically. Disgusted, I covered my mouth and nose, and only then did he realize. In an attempt to please, he picked up the roses and trotted to place them outside the cafe. About the divorce, I suppose Aunt has already told you. Since you've come to find me, it saves me the trouble of going through legal procedures. This was also the main reason I agreed to sit down face to face with him. It's been half a year since I left until now. I don't want to drag it out any longer, I just want to settle it quickly. Hearing my words, his originally bright eyes instantly dimmed. But for me, apart from divorce, I don't think there's anything else to talk about with him. I won't divorce you. I came this time hoping you could go back with me. Go back with him? How ridiculous. Am I some cheap person? To come and go at his beck and call. I just escaped from the cage, how could I allow myself to step back into the abyss? Moreover, without me, he and Ivy can be together openly. They don't have to worry about my nominal wife status. Ivy's child can rightfully become his eldest son. If you came all this way just to tell me a bad joke, I'm sorry, my time is precious, and I won't accompany you. See you in court directly. I took a deep breath, intending to leave. But he was faster, grabbing my hand. The coldness of his palm made me instinctively retract my hand. Elena, I once promised you that I would live well with you. I've come back now, please don't leave me, okay? This might be the only promise he kept. Unfortunately, it was fulfilled too late. Time won't wait for those who stand still, nor will it slow down for those who are leaving. Opportunities aren't reserved for those who don't care. When he pinned humiliation and infamy on me, when I was most helpless and sad, he was accompanying another woman, taking care of someone else's child. At that time, did he ever consider my feelings even a little? My heart was broken, and the love was gone. Now, his retention is worthless in my eyes. One wants to leave, one wants to stay. Jason grabbed my arm again, preventing me from leaving. Just as we were in a stalemate, a large hand with distinct knuckles pulled him away. Leo stood between us, protecting me behind him. Harassing my employee in public, sir, you're quite bold. Jason was stunned for 2 seconds, and after seeing my grateful expression, he finally reacted. So, indeed, no one will wait for him in the same place forever. So, I also have someone to protect me, worthy of being favored. From desolation to anger, he gritted his teeth and said, Elena is my wife, I'm taking my wife back now. You're her boss, right? I'll resign on her behalf, she's quitting. Leo laughed, and I laughed too. Our smiles were full of mockery towards his self-righteousness. Resigning isn't something you can decide. My private lawyer will contact Elena later, filing a divorce lawsuit isn't difficult. Isn't that right, ex-husband? With Leo present, Jason couldn't take me away. In the end, he just left a sentence and silently departed. I looked out the window and found that the 99 roses placed at the door had already been taken away by someone unknown. He said that it turns out that seeing the other party have someone favored by their side is so painful. Now, he himself has tasted this bitter fruit of sadness. To express my gratitude, I offered to treat Leo to dinner. But when it came to paying the bill, he was still one step ahead of me, saying it was to celebrate in advance that I could get rid of the scumbag. No wonder, when the whole company was spreading rumors about us, you kept clarifying. You don't need to worry, my lawyer is very good at handling divorce lawsuits. I believe that in the near future, you won't need to clarify everywhere. I sighed, about to say thank you to him, but felt something was off. What did he mean by in the near future, you won't need to clarify? I looked at him with inquiring eyes and found that Leo's ears had turned red. His performance was so obvious that without saying, I knew what it meant. I will wait for you, wait until the day you get divorced. During this period, you can confirm with me repeatedly. I promise you, my liking for you won't change. I finally knew what it felt like to be loved. After Leo confessed to me, his favoritism towards me was no longer hidden. It was displayed openly in front of everyone. During the divorce litigation with Jason, he came to find me more than once. But Leo would drive him away like swatting a fly. He even rented the house next to mine, fearing that I would be harassed. As long as there was any slight movement in my house, he would come knocking immediately. I even suspected that he had installed surveillance in my home. But he just said that when you truly care about someone, you inadvertently focus your attention on them. How could I not know? 7 years ago, when I pursued Jason, I was just as passionate as he is now. The helplessness and sweetness in it can only be known by those who have experienced open love. Gradually, Jason didn't come to find me anymore. Perhaps he also knew that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't win back my heart. Moreover, by my side, there was already someone more suitable than him. Love is a kind of possession, but also a kind of letting go. After all, love cannot be achieved unilaterally. When the heart is gone, the person cannot be retained. 2 months later, I received a document sent by Jason. Inside was the divorce agreement with his signature. Before the court session, he chose to end our marriage, which shouldn't have existed, in a relatively decent way. From the bone-chilling winter to the scorching summer, I had waited too long. With the divorce agreement in hand, I took the initiative to knock on the next door. It was an eager embrace, a passionate mutual rush. When Leo and I walked into the company hand in hand, the person with the biggest reaction was Maggie. She was the first to ship our boss-employee couple. She was also the one who ran to tell Leo when Jason came to find me for the first time. The fact that we could become a couple so quickly is largely thanks to her. When can we have your wedding, Candy? My dear boss lady. The term boss lady made someone secretly delighted for a long time. He immediately called the finance department to give Maggie a bonus. As long as Elena is willing, I carry my household registration book with me. We can go get the marriage certificate anytime. My wedding with Leo was 6 months after we officially got together. That day, he moved from next door to my house, and just like that, naturally, we welcomed a little life. At the wedding, he promised in front of everyone that he would love me and the child for a lifetime. I knew and firmly believed that his promise to me would never fail. Miss Elena, are you willing to become Mr. Leo's wife? I looked at Leo, who was holding my hand tightly, and answered firmly, I do. When I looked towards the audience, I saw a familiar figure. After hearing my affirmative answer, he left desolately. And I just stroked my belly, eagerly anticipating the birth of this little life. Because I know that his father loves me very, very much, and also loves our child.